Hi everybody and welcome to episode 2 of DPSI with Aggie. Before we get on with today's topic, which is going to be a breakdown of the exam in 2 parts, I would like to make a small disclaimer. This series is not meant to replace a course or a formal path of learning. I apologize if this is obvious, but I just thought I'm going to get it out there. I thought of this series as a companion, a bit of a guide, a supplementary material for you to use alongside your learning, where I can share my experiences, support you and help you avoid the mistakes that I made and get the best outcomes for yourself. So before we move on to today's topic, I would like to do a very short recap of last week's video, episode 1. So DPSI is an exam-based qualification, and what that means is that you have to pass the entire exam that constitutes 5 mandatory modules. You have 3 years to pass the entire exam from the point of which you obtain a pass on one of the modules, and that means you don't need to write a thesis, you don't need to submit any portfolio work, you don't need to submit any essays. It's just as simple, or shall we say, it's just as uncomplicated as sitting and passing the exam, upon the completion and passing of which you will receive an electronic certificate. In breaking down the exam, which is going to take place this week and the next, I would like to mention, in my opinion, the most important consideration, and the fact that is that the exam is now online only. Now, this is quite a big change from what it used to be like. I believe this change took place over the past couple of years. And the DPSI Level 6 used to be a face-to-face only exam. And indeed, this is how I sat the exam in 2015. And for some of you, my dear colleagues, the online only remote form of the exam might actually be quite a welcome piece of news, because it will get rid of maybe some anxiety connected with travel, finding accommodation, maybe not being able to find an examination center close to you, and that might just make it, a bit more easier to sit, or if you have some mobility issues or some restrictions with time when it comes to travel. There is also the flip side of that. I know that not everybody is comfortable with technology, and not everybody likes to work remotely or sit the exams remotely. But I have some pretty good news for you again. I sat and passed the now withdrawn Diploma in Police Interpreting exam back in 2020 in November. It was a little bit of a crazy time. As you remember, it was the pandemic. The exam was rescheduled several times. When I registered initially, I was convinced that it would be taking place face-to-face in one of the examination centers. I believe it was one of the centers in Sheffield. However, the CIOL made a decision to organize the exam remotely. I sat 2 units from the DPI, Unit 1 and Unit 4. It gave me a really good insight into the pitfalls, the potential issues around sitting an exam in your own home, on your own laptop, using your own internet connection. So I'm going to be able to talk you and walk you through that as well. The information that today's presentation is based on is contained in 2 documents which are available on the CIOL's website. This is the address. You don't have to be a member to download those documents. You don't have to log into the portal itself. You can just download them. And those documents can be found in the qualification section, and they are called a qualification specification, and this is a version from May 2022, and candidate assessment regulation document from December 2022. So as I have mentioned, the DPSI Level 6 examination, and that's regardless of which one of the pathways you want to sit the examination in. You might remember from last week that there are three main pathways: law, local government and health, and within law we have Scottish law, the law of England and Wales, and the law of Northern Ireland. Regardless of which one of you choose, you can sit the exam either from home using the CIOL's own virtual centre, or you can sit the examination in one of the CIOLQ approved exam venues in the UK. It's very important to mention that it has to be in the UK, and it's important to remember that there will be two types of platforms that will be used for the exam itself. So one of those platforms is something that you probably are familiar with or fairly familiar with, and that is Microsoft Teams or MS Teams, and this platform will be used for unit 1, 2 and 3. So these are the units that are to do with oral interpretation. And the two written units, so that's translation into English and translation from English. So from English into other language and into English from other language, they will be basically done using a so-called Rogo platform. I have actually been examined on using those two platforms during my DPI, so I will be telling you a bit more on that later on. So this is basically your kind of opportunity to have a good think about what kind of situation you have at home when it comes to internet connection, availability of a quiet space, because all this is going to be very important when it comes to something that I called non-negotiables when it comes to the examination. So those so-called non-negotiables, as I call them, are things that you must adhere to and must remember about getting, obtaining and preparing in advance of the exam, otherwise you may not be able to sit the exam. So the number one thing is that, as I've mentioned, the exam is online, so you will, if you are sitting at home, you will be needing your own laptop or your own PC. You can't sit the exam on a phone or a tablet, and I strongly recommend, if you can afford to make some sort of a contribution towards investing in some equipment, I strongly recommend getting an external USB camera, because it's really great for showing, you know, the image of you in a lot better quality. The image is a lot clearer. I am using a Logitech Stream camera. Laptop's camera can be fine, but on average I find that the image is not great. So number one thing that you're going to need is your own laptop or your own PC. You will also need a document to confirm your identity. This is going to be part of the exams procedure. You will have to confirm your identity using either a passport, a national identification card, or a driving license. So before you consider registering for the exam, it's important that you have an up-to-date document of identity. The other thing that it's extremely important is, again, we are still talking about sitting the exam at home, is that you have to have a quiet, private environment where nobody will be able to interrupt, come in, knock on the door, ask you questions. The CIOL says that you cannot have any TV background, any music, any noise, and you cannot sit the exam at a library, an airport lounge, a station, coffee shop, or a school or an office, or an open internet cafe. That is a big no-no. You need a quiet space, you need a private space. I understand that this may be a bit of a challenge for some of you colleagues who have children, who have pets, who have family members. So for those of you, I will be discussing some possible options when it comes to alternative provisions when it comes to sitting your exam not from home. Please do remember that if you cannot sit the exam from home, you can sit it from an exam center that has been approved by the CIOL. One of the things that might be worth exploring if you can't sit the exam at home is renting a space in an office building. There are options usually in larger cities. I mean, I am based in Blackburn, Lancashire. It's not a big town, it's not even a city, but we do have some facilities where you can basically rent a room per hour or per half a day or per day, depending on what offers they have, and you are provided internet access and Wi-Fi access. This is one of the options that might be possible to explore. Another option is some of the community centres and neighbourhood learning centres, children's centres also rent spaces for community groups or for all sorts of learning opportunities, so that also might be an option for you if you cannot sit the exam at home, because it is absolutely vital that if you are sitting the exam at home, you have a peaceful and quiet environment without any interruptions whatsoever. I did record a short video about a method of making sure that you can minimize the risk of someone knocking on your door or every driver trying to like draw your attention to the fact that they have a parcel for you, and I'm going to put a link to that video in the comments. Another extremely important thing to remember, that during the exam, things like sports watch, Fitbit, so smartwatches, Fitbits, Apple Watches are banned. You cannot have a watch like this on your wrist, and you cannot use it to check the time, and also the responsibility for checking the time and checking how much time is on you. So you need to be able to have a way of checking the time, and unfortunately phones are also banned. So be mindful that you can have the phone with you until the moment the exam starts. So there are certain situations where, for example, the examiners might be running late. This is exactly what happened in 2020 when I was sitting my DPI examination in November. There was quite a bit of a delay, but I had my phone with me, and I had the emergency CIOL's number to ring just in case if there were any emergencies. However, once the exam starts, your watch has to be switched off, not put on silent and not put on airplane mode. You have to have it switched off, because you cannot have it with you, and it has to be put away from your desk, and you cannot look at it and check the time. So my advice would be advice of CIOL, is to get yourself a simple wristwatch, analog or electronic wristwatch, or have a clock on your wall so that you can keep track of the time. So remember, no phones and no smartwatches are allowed during the exam. Since you will be sitting your exam using your laptop or a PC, your computer screen will be monitored and the exam itself will be recorded. This is very important. And as you show the invigilator your document of identity, so passport, national ID card or driving license, by doing that you are giving your consent to the recording of the examination. You also have to remember that, first of all, like I said, your computer screen will be monitored. You cannot have a false or blurred background. So for example, my blinds, it's a real physical background. Now if you can't have a installation like this, just leave the background as it is. It's not a big deal, but you cannot blur it and you cannot superimpose a picture in the background. You can only have one laptop or one PC, and again they recommend that you plug it in. There's nothing worse than you running out of juice halfway, so plug it in. You're not allowed to mirror screen, that's absolutely not allowed, and you can only have one screen. You cannot have any additional screens, and you cannot have any additional devices. So I've already mentioned about the mobile phones and smartwatches or wristwatches, but you can't have any tablets, anything around you. If you need something to drink, they recommend water in a bottle. I mean, I have this bottle, but it has writing on it. Now you are only allowed water in a bottle with the label removed. You're not allowed any mugs, tumblers or glasses. They also recommend lighting, so daylight quality lighting. This is what I have right now. I am facing a window which is quite large, and I also have a ring light here. but they recommend daylight level lighting and an overhead light as well. When it comes to positioning of your person during the exam, you have to have your shoulders and head in the middle of the camera, and they have to be able to see you like from that. It's also recommended that you have a microphone enabled in Microsoft Teams, but I would personally recommend that you get yourself one of these, because not only does it give you better sound quality, and also it helps you focus on every word that is being spoken, because that's absolutely vital that you hear every single word during the exam. Also, these have a noise cancelling function, so even if someone comes Royal Mail or dog barking, if you have one of these, this is going to take care of that problem. And also, if it has a microphone that's built in, it's going to vastly improve the quality of the output, which means that you will be heard and understood a lot better. I absolutely do not recommend using laptops microphone. Headsets can be picked up for as little as £30. I will be putting some links in the video description. You can pick up a very decent Sennheiser USB headset for about £30. The sooner you start looking for a headset with a microphone, the better, because it's an investment that will really pay for itself, and not just for your exam. Give yourself the best chance to hear and to be understood perfectly. Get yourself one of these. Again, this is probably quite an obvious thing, but it has to be only you in the room. You can't have anybody in the room. Again, we're going back to the situation where perhaps you have children or spouses or partners or someone who might actually just forget that you are sitting an exam. So if that might be the case, I would recommend either a CIOL approved examination center based in the UK, or renting professional office space where you know that nobody's gonna come in and interrupt you in order to sit the exam. Couple of more technical things. In order to make sure that the Microsoft Teams works well, clear your browser cache and your browsing histories and cookies before sitting the exam, and you also have to have cookies enabled in your browser. I will screen record all those technical things that I'm talking about right now, so don't worry, don't panic if you're thinking, what's cookies, what's browser history. I will be talking about tech in more detail later on, but all this is just to give you an idea of what the guidance is like for this exam. Again, this information can be found in the Candidate Assessment Regulation PDF document, which is downloadable from the CIOL's website. You go on the CIOL Chartered Institute of Linguists website, qualifications, the Diploma in Public Service Interpreting DPSI, so preparation, qualification specification, and candidate information. This is the document that I used it to prepare for today's presentation. So you can just read it all at your leisure. It's broken down quite well, and they give you all those technical details. And last but not least, make sure you take care of your welfare. So they recommend you having a drink, having something to eat, and having a rest before the exam, because the exam has a stipulated amount of time. There will not be any time added. So for example, if you want to quickly go to the loo, that time is lost. And also you have to give your examiner notice that you're going to go and use the loo. For example, you cannot just leave without telling them. So make sure that you are fed, watered, make sure you have something to eat if you can. You won't be able to eat and you won't be able to vape, and water only in a clear bottle with a label removed. A very important thing to remember is that The examination is testing how you would perform at an assignment. On a certain level, you should treat this examination like you would treat a job. So when you come to a job, you come prepared, you are basically fulfilling certain expectations, and one of those is appropriate dress. Now, I don't want to sound like a stickler for rules or someone who is, very conservative, but just to give myself a peace of mind, I have a certain dress code for work. I don't like thinking about what I'm going to wear. It's kind of a chore for me, really. So I have a certain amount of pieces that I can just throw on. That's done. I posted a link to my article about dressing for interpreting and ways where you can get good quality, cheap, durable clothes in order to look well and professional. I think especially for in a situation like an exam, it's extremely important that you get yourself in the right frame of mind. Clothes can really help you do that. When I put some makeup on and put my clothes on, I immediately feel more professional, I feel more at ease, I feel more confident. And also it creates a really good impression. You are projecting professionalism and reliability and respect for that situation. Even though it's just an exam, you still act as if you were carrying out an actual interpreting job. So just to quickly recap what I've been talking about, the DPSI Diploma in Public Service Interpreting Level 6 qualification is online only, and before you consider registering for the exam, before you consider starting the studying process for the exam, make sure that you remember that it's online only and that you will have to take care of the appropriate environment for your exam. So you're going to have to make a choice whether you sit it at home, and maybe if it's not possible, whether you would be registering to sit it in a CIOL approved UK based examination center. This was the formal requirements of the exam. Next week I will be talking about the 5 core mandatory modules of the exam itself, and I'm going to be briefly outlining what they entail. Because the past papers constitute copyrighted material, I cannot give you real examples from the past papers. I cannot give you real examples of what the examination was, because that would constitute a copyright breach. However, before you start thinking about the DPSI, the great news is that you can buy past papers. I highly recommend to order a sample past paper in your language so you can have a look at the 5 mandatory core modules of the DPSI examination. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Find me on Facebook. I am a member of numerous Facebook groups for interpreters, translators, and interpreting and translating jobs. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can ask me questions. Get in touch, suggest some issues that you want to discuss, comment on this video. I do reply to all of the comments, I do reply to all the questions, so please get in touch. And if you like this video, consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. I rely on you, my dear colleagues who are watching, to grow, so I can bring you more content, so I can bring you more knowledge, and I can support you and help you even better. So thank you again. See you next Thursday, and until then, keep safe, keep learning, and keep growing. Bye bye.